Dating overseas has changed over the years, and not in a good way, bro. This video is not going to be scripted, but this is just off my own personal observations. And for the record, I'm not new to this, okay? And I'm going to be using Guatemala as an example because this country is where my family's from. I've been traveling there practically my whole life, and I've lived in this country multiple times. I've stayed there for like 3 months, 4 months at a time. And I also stayed out there for practically a year in 2021. Okay, so I'm not new to this, but the truth of the matter is women, not just in Guatemala, but in other countries are starting to change. And the value of being a man from the States is also starting to change. Okay, so let's start with this. Traditional women in other countries are starting to become more rare, okay, thanks to social media, thanks to technology, and thanks to the influx of men who are going to these other countries looking for relationships, looking for a good time, looking for wives. But because of these three things, social media, technology, and the influx of men going to these countries, a lot of these women are starting to develop options now. And like I mentioned, I'm going to use Guatemala as an example because I can go back to even 12 years ago when things were incredibly different. Okay? Because during that time, a lot of the girls were much more simpler. All right? They were humble. You know, they came from humble beginnings, and the technology was different. Okay, they were rocking these cheap Huawei phones, these cheap Chinese phones that they were only really good for one thing, which is making a phone call or texting. They weren't nearly as sophisticated compared to the technology we have today. Okay, so a lot of the girls, well, pretty much a lot of the people were rocking these phones that could barely run social media at the time. So this forced a lot of them to go outside and socialize. Okay. And the types of men that were going to any of these countries, I'm using Guatemala as an example, the only kinds of men that would go there were guys who had the means, who had the money. Okay. They knew the customs already. They knew the language, or they were retired. So the amount of men that were going to these countries were much lower compared to today. And which means the supply of them were much lower. So that means the demand from the women for American men were somewhat higher because American men during that time were way more valuable. There weren't so much of them available. Okay? They weren't in their inboxes trying to date them, trying to get to know them. Okay? So it was much, I don't want to say easy. I want to definitely, I want to preface that it wasn't necessarily easy. But if you wanted to get into a relationship and experience a reserved girl who was relationship minded during those times, all you had to do was show up. If you had a passport, if you didn't even have to have a crazy fashion sense. You can go there with just a t-shirt, cargos, some trainers, and if you had some money on you, you didn't even have to leave with your wallet. You can just go there, and if you knew somewhat of the language, the women at the time were even willing to work with you if you didn't know that much of the language. They would have sat down and taught you how to speak their language. Okay? They would respect you more for trying to speak their language. Okay? So You can move without the added pressure. And women at that time would have loved to be with somebody who was from the States, and they weren't really with them for the money. If they saw that this guy was relationship minded and he had morals, that guy could easily experience quality women who wanted a relationship long term and potentially even marry him. Okay, so what changed? What changed? The influx of guys who supposedly were going to these countries wanting a relationship. Okay, and the technology. Okay, the demand for foreign women has changed because let's face it, the American women, we already know that there are headaches. Okay, they are insufferable to be around, and men today do not want to date them. But once upon a time, there was an influx of dudes wanting a relationship with the women out here in the States. Okay? And the American women were able to bank off of this and essentially monetize it too. All right? But now that a lot of the men are starting to become more hip to what's going on overseas, how they could find love, they could experience quality women overseas. They're starting to save their money. They're starting to learn a trade or a skill. They're packing their bags with their passports and they're getting the hell out of the States and they're going overseas. But let me tell you something, bro. And a lot of people are not going to like this. But women overseas play the same games. Women overseas play the exact same games as the women out here in the States do. That's not to say that they play on the same frequency as the women out here in the States do, but they still play the same games. Okay? Because now that women overseas have developed a form of like celebrity clout, thanks to social media, thanks to the demand, all right, from men from the States wanting to be with them. Now, a lot of the women overseas can pick and choose. The American man is not considered valuable compared to 10, 12 years ago. All right, even the most decent looking woman in these countries, they have a guy or two or more than 5+ guys from the States and from Europe who are in their inbox wanting to get to know them, wanting to give them a lifestyle. Okay? I've watched women in Guatemala, from where my family's from, and in other parts of Guatemala change. Whereas if I had met these same girls 10+ years ago, like let's say I meet a 21-year-old today in Guatemala, there's a good chance that that girl would have a bunch of dudes in her inbox from not just the local guys, but the guys from the States, from Europe, all in their inbox, trying to give them a lifestyle. Whereas if she was 21, 10+ years ago, that girl would have some cheap Chinese phone that could barely run the social media account, all right, just for texting, and she'll be out more, and she'll be much more approachable. She wouldn't have this conceited, mentality, or as we like to say in Guatemala, creída, okay? She wouldn't be conceited with it, okay? Her head wouldn't be gassed up with all these likes. Dude, I've seen this one chick from Mexico, a small part of Mexico, literally blow up on TikTok. Okay, she had like 100,000+ likes on her photo or her video. Okay, her video had 1 million views. And then she also had an Instagram channel onto it as well. So I went on her Instagram and she had a pinned post and it was just a selfie in black and white. And she was wearing these really short shorts, you know what I mean? And she was really pretty, but she wasn't anything to write home about. She wasn't celebrity status. This girl had 100,000 likes on that photo. And I was just sitting there scratching my head. I'm like, dude, this girl, I've met girls prettier than this in Guatemala. And yet those girls, they not getting that many likes. So what's the deal with her? That's because, dude, the amount of dudes from all around the world, okay, the jig is up. Everybody knows that there are better women worth talking to in these other countries. But what's happening now is a lot of these women are starting to get more hip to it. They're becoming more aware that their value, their foreign value, it's like they can pick and choose now. They could be picky. And they're starting to study the game. And here's another thing too. The reason why I talk about technology is because back then they had something like for these phones, they still have it. But we're gonna use Latin America. They have data packages called Saldo. And that's basically like a prepaid package that you can buy. Okay, if you have a phone, you can buy a data package and it can last you like 3 or 4 days or wherever, how many days you want. But back in those days, it was really just for phone calls, text messages, and social media, like for Messenger and stuff like that, and WhatsApp. But now, those data packages, they come with free social media consumption. Okay, this is damaging because when a girl decides she wants to go ahead and buy some data package for 2 days or 3 days or 4 days, she can consume unlimited levels of social media content. And what do you think she's watching? Okay? She's not watching how to cook. She's not watching how to be a wife. They're consuming crazy amounts of American culture on TikTok, on Instagram, on Reels, on Facebook, okay? And they're consuming like an insurmountable amount of content from their favorite influencers. And they're studying their influencers. They don't have to read books anymore. They're studying their favorite micro and mega influencers on Instagram, on TikTok, and they're showing them the game. They're showing them how to move around on social media. And then now they're trying to act like the American carbon copies now, okay? Because these influencers in the States are influencing a lot of the people from these other countries, okay? I have to paint this picture for you guys because this explains why the women in these other countries are starting to change. Because 10 plus years ago, you didn't have any of this shit. You didn't have crazy mega influencers, at least not to the level that it is now. Back then, you could go to any of these other countries and you can experience quality women who are reserved. Now let me add this. You can still experience traditional women, okay, who are not into social media. I know girls personally, okay, from Guatemala, who some of them are paired off. Some of them I know personally. I know their name. I know their family. That they're not really on social media like that. Beautiful girls. They don't get that many likes on social media either. All right, they're well reserved. They have morals, okay, and they don't do backflips over American guys. They're not like, you know, they're not particularly invested in American men because they have friends, they have family members who are probably in America, or they know somebody who's from the States. So it's not a big deal to them. But with the way technology, the movement, with a lot of men going to these other countries, okay, and social media, this is what's creating the change. Okay? And for a lot of guys, they don't want to hear this because the value of being an American man has lowered, because now a lot of women can just go in their inbox and they can find plenty of guys in there in the States simping. Okay? And What's the solution? Bro, you're going to have to start vetting these women, these other countries. I don't care what country you go to. Colombia, Thailand, Mexico, Guatemala, Brazil. It doesn't matter. You're going to have to start vetting these women, because just as much as a lot of men are learning that there are foreign women out there who are traditional, a lot of the women out there are studying. They're studying the game, and they're trying to make themselves even more high value. They're trying to attract the best of the best. So now a lot of men are starting to develop competition to the point where if you go out there to these other countries, there's a good chance that the girl that you're interested in, she already met an American dude. And he showed her an experience. So that sets the bar for her. Okay? There's a good chance that if you go out there to these other countries, you may experience flakes. You may experience getting ghosted. You may experience even getting friend zoned. All right? And you have to go out there with an open mind, knowing that you're not nearly as valuable compared to how you would have been 10, 20 years ago. And now you are going to have some competition, and the amount of traditional women are becoming more scarce, because a lot of the women in these other countries, they're starting to immerse themselves in American culture. They're starting to immerse themselves in social media, pop culture. And there is a lot of men who are trying to compete for the best out there. And a lot of the men that are going out to these other countries are not doing it right. And I'm sure you've heard the issues that are going on in these other countries. So you're going to have to be on your P's and Q's and start vetting these women. Women who come from intact family, like their mom and their dad are still together. Their father still runs the show in the house. Okay? And the daughter respects her father. The father's not a doormat. Okay? So that means she doesn't go out to the club outside her father's jurisdiction or outside her father's orders. She respects him. Okay? She's not in and out of relationships. Okay, with multiple guys. She's not immersed in this Kardashian cheap behavior that's going on Instagram and TikTok in general. With all these F-girl pages. She's not immersed in that. She's not interested in that. Okay, she has respect for herself. Okay, and she's probably had maybe 1 or 2 serious relationships. And she's interested in starting a family. She's relationship minded. She has a preference. And she's not immersed in dealing with just solely American men. Like, she'll cut you off if she was to find a quality man out in her country, even if you're an American dude. And I've had this happen to me too. That's the level of respect you want your future wife from these other countries to have. If she's incredibly immersed in the American culture, she's not a good girl. If she's involved with a bunch of dudes, she has a lot of guy friends, she's not a good girl. If she has a bad relationship with her father, she's not a good girl. If she comes from a single parent household, she's not a good girl. You have to be mindful in this one. You have to go to these other countries already you have to have thermal vision, because these girls are starting to study the game, and they already know a lot of men are going out there for them. So that's the rest of this video. I mean, I figured I'd make this video because I figured a lot of people need to know this, because shit was different 10, 15 years ago, bro. And now things have changed, and not really in a good way, because the same girls who would be traditional back in the day, they starting to change, and now they're starting to lose their value too. They're starting to lose the traditional values. They're starting to become immersed in this hypergamy and you know, this culture, this very toxic American culture that's really damaged the girls out here. They're starting to permeate to these other countries. Do not let any of these channels mess around and tell you that, oh, nothing's changing and you can still go out there and find a traditional girl. Just be who you are, and you can go out there with your passport and not even know the language. Trust me, dude. You're going to struggle if you go to these other countries thinking that just your passport is enough. Because if we think that's gonna happen, you're gonna go to these other countries, you're gonna get played. Okay, you're gonna get played. I'm not gonna sit here and I'm not sugarcoating it. I'm not sugarcoating it. Okay, can you find traditional women in these other countries? Yes, but is it going to take effort? Okay, and it's going to take some serious vetting? Yes, because it was, I guess, the standard was lower, I guess, back then and back in the day. But today, a lot of these women are starting to develop crazy amounts of standards because there's a lot of guys in their inbox wanting to show them the time day. Okay, they want to show them the world. Because guys out here in the States are done with these American girls. So where do you think they're going? Especially the dudes that were pretty much fueling the OF movement out here in the States. What do you think they're doing with their money? They're going overseas with it. Okay, and it's starting to tarnish a lot of these women overseas now, to the point where now they're starting to lump up a lot of American guys to be like them. So it's becoming increasingly more challenging to experience what it's really truly like to be with a foreign girl who wants to be with you for who you are, or who has traditional values. You're gonna have to start learning the language. You're gonna have to start having standards. Okay, and you're gonna have to be a little bit more competitive, because there's a lot of dudes that are going to these other countries and they're sort of ruining it for a lot of guys who have relationship mind. Like they have a mindset where they want to have a relationship, a serious one. They want to get married one day. They want to start a family. But a lot of these new dudes, these new school dudes, are going to these other countries and they're ruining it for a lot of other guys who are serious minded. They want to play around. So, and to be honest, what I think should happen is, if you're going to go to these other countries with the intent to want to be in a serious relationship, you're going to have to start vetting multiple women. I'm not saying don't sleep with multiple women. You don't even have to do that. You're going to have to start putting them through a strict process, or a strict vetting process, where you're getting to know multiple ones. If they're into that, Kardashian, Instagram, clout chasing, liberal type of BS, cut them off. They're not good. They're not good women. If they're into having guy friends, cut them off. A whole bunch of them, especially, cut them off. You're gonna have to put them through. You're gonna have to put a lot of these women through a process where you vet them, and if they are doing things that are questionable, like having a lot of guy friends, or they're immersed in the American culture, or they're in and out of relationships. I mean, those are some of the things you're gonna have to have. You're gonna have to have a vetting process. Guys are going to have a strict vetting process before they even start remotely considering a girl to date. Because if you don't have these protocols, you're gonna be sucked dry of your money. You might even end up in trouble, because these girls are the real players and they're studying the game every single day. All right, and I don't want dudes to be going out there getting got, you know what I mean? And because I'm sure you've seen what's going on right now. All right, so make sure you're on your P's and Q's. And for the record, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. The name of this channel is John Travel Talk, and this channel is going to be specifically for travel conversations, and maybe even some response videos. So that wraps up this video, bro. All right. I hope you guys found it useful. And if you did, leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your experiences. All right. Do you feel things have changed over the years as far as dating overseas? Because I believe it has, bro. All right. But hey, I could be wrong. I'm just going based off my own personal observation. So yeah, leave your comments below. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Okay, this is John Travel Talk, and I'll see you guys in the next video.